Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. Thank you all for tuning in today. And inshallah, you all had a really great last couple of weeks since our last live stream, where I was really too tired and exhausted to do a real in-depth kind of thing. So this week, inshallah, we're going to get in-depth and let's get right into it. All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. All right. Okay, so today's topic, inshallah, we are going to talk about getting back on track, and particularly with Ramadan less than a week away. I just want to hopefully talk to you guys and give you all and myself some reminders to help us in the month of Ramadan to get back to where we need to be if we're not already there, and to improve, and also to reignite and really reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reignite our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let me just get right into it. As always, you guys, the live chat box is there. I can see all of your questions and comments, so feel free as you guys are listening to just leave any questions or comments that you may have. Okay, so I'm going to start with a comment that somebody wrote that is a really good starting point to leap off from. So she writes, when I began practicing, she's a convert. She said, I used to find strong motivation to perform good deeds, voluntary worship, a lot of dhikr. I used to find softness of heart. Now, however, I don't have that motivation and feel a hardness of heart and a weakness of resolve. I don't generally fall into open sin. However, I fear that if I get weaker, I may falter. Now, I feel as though we all in some way can relate to what she's saying. At some point in our lives, we've had an iman low, or we've felt as though we don't find that softness of heart, that our heart has kind of been hardened. And we know that iman, and I say this all the time, is not at a fixed point. Iman is fluid, it moves up and down. And if we're not safeguarding our iman, if we're not doing anything to strengthen it, then consequently it weakens. But we cannot let shaitan trick us into believing in, or into thinking that there's no turning back, that we're too far deep into sin, or our heart is too hardened. Or the opposite, that the things we're doing aren't sinful. We can't let shaitan trick us into thinking that the wrong things that we're doing are not a big deal. We have to realize that today is a new day, that we can constantly renew our covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that our past does not define our present, that we can move forward, make changes, start to soften that heart, and gain a connection with a real strong connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We renew this feeling and revive ourselves spiritually, even if we know that eventually it may weaken again, and we'll have to renew it again, because this is an ever-continuing process of highs and lows, and feeling this, exactly what she's saying, this hardness of heart or weakening of resolve, and then letting that kick you into first gear to get you back on track. Now, like I said, we all have, you know, our highs and lows, which is normal, but we don't want the highs and lows to be so extreme. We want it to just be kind of in the middle, so that our highs are high and our lows are just about here, and the midpoint is just like, you know, 2 degrees, not like 10 degrees, if that makes sense. So of course we're going to have our highs and lows, but we never want to get to the point where our hearts have been blackened or hardened so much that it's almost, you know, beyond repair. In fact, I'm going to read the Hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he described this process whereby the heart hardens and is overcome by weakness. He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the heart will be subjected to trial after trial, and there will appear a black stain on any heart that's affected, which will spread until the heart is completely black and sealed, so that it will not recognize any good deed or denounce any evil, except whatever suits its desires. So this is the point. We don't want to get to this low of a low. This isn't, you know, like I said, we're all going to have lows, but ba'd ash-sharr law samah Allah, we never want to get to this point where the heart is completely black and sealed so that it doesn't recognize any good deed, it doesn't denounce any evil. But regardless, like I said, we all can relate to what she's saying. So let's get into the causes of weakening of faith. So before we can really get into what we need to do to get back on track, we have to understand what's been going on. Why have we gotten so far off that path? What has caused our hearts to weaken or to harden? So the Rasul ﷺ in another hadith, very famous hadith you all probably know, he said, it's expected that the nations will call other nations against you, against Muslims, as the feasters call each other to eat from the food in front of them on a large plate. And a person asked, will that be because of our small number on that day? And the Prophet ﷺ said, no, your number will be great. You will be huge in numbers, but you will be without substance, like the foam on the face of a river. And certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove from the hearts of enemies the fear from you. And surely Allah will throw wahn into your hearts. And at that point, a person asks, oh, Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what is wahn? And the Prophet said in response, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wahn is to love this world and to hate death. So this wahn, that there literally is no English translation, this love of this world and hatred of death, results from the weakness of iman and the lack of taqwa or God consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we love this life so much and fear and hate death, we suffer from a sickness in our hearts, which is a sickness of iman, which is this wahn. And this is a phenomenon that we are seeing widespread amongst Muslims today. So often we feel this hardness in our heart, like we said. We don't find any joy in worship. Reading Quran doesn't move us. We fall into sin so easily. It's a destructive nature, this wahn, because it's like a snowball effect where slowly but surely maybe you won't denounce sin, and then slowly you fall into minor sins and then major sins, and it just snowballs out of control. So we have to stop it before it gets to that point, because it's so detrimental to our spiritual and moral well-beings. So that's one of the things that causes this weakness of faith, broadly this wahn, but 3 categories within that. Number 1, we have preoccupation with our worldly life, which is while we're neglecting the hereafter. So, we all get caught up in our daily lives. We go to school, we go to work, we're mothers, we're daughters and sisters and friends, and there we have so much going on. We're focused on our marriages, on our friendships, on our careers. We just become so preoccupied with this dunya. And maybe it's not, a preoccupation that is sinful, but just having this preoccupation with this dunya, and we feel like this is the most important aspect of existence, and we fail to ponder upon death and akhirah and what's to come. So this preoccupation of this dunya causes that weakness of faith, and we allow diseases of the heart to flourish, whether it's vanity or pride or wanting fame or whatever your disease of the heart is. So in relation to this, the Prophet ﷺ said, the world is a prison for the believer and a paradise for the unbeliever, in a famous hadith. Yet the way we live is as though this world is the paradise and the next world is the prison. We fear death so much because we fear that it might be that prison for us, and yet we rejoice so much in this dunya, where the opposite is the reality. As the Rasul ﷺ said, this world is a prison for the believer. Why is this world a prison for the believer? Because we feel as though we are so constricted in this dunya, where we know the real life starts when we die, in the akhirah. And that's the real paradise, is in the akhirah. He also said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, be in the world like a traveler, like a passerby, and reckon yourself of the dead. In another variation, he said, my connection with the world is like that of a traveler, resting for a while underneath the shade of a tree and then moving on. And I'm sure you all have heard this hadith many times. And the wisdom behind living in this world like you're a traveler is not attaching yourself so much to any one thing in this dunya, whether it's your home or your community you live in, or your children or your job, or, you know, I'm so sorry guys, whatever it is. So detaching yourself like that of a traveler. A traveler packs a few things in a suitcase. You go for your little weekend excursion, you pick up where you left off and you leave. So when you're a traveler, you're light. You're not anchoring yourself. You're not putting down roots so far into the ground that it's tough to remove them. You can be light about, you know, the way that you think of this dunya, your mindset of this dunya, which is fleeting, which is temporary. Knowing that the real and permanent life starts when we die and is in the akhirah and not in this dunya. So that's the first, the first cause of this weakness of faith, preoccupation with this dunya. The second one is living in an environment surrounded with sin. And this is something, you know, I was just having a conversation today with a friend, and I was telling her how, you know, I was so blessed in Dubai because I became so sensitized to certain things like alcohol or like nakedness. You didn't see it that much in Dubai. And when you did see it, it was shocking. Like if I went to the beach and I saw somebody like all out in a bikini, it would be like, what is happening? You know, to see that was it wasn't normal. Whereas here, you know, the nakedness is rampant. It's all over the place. And you know, living in America or in the West, where the environment around us is so conducive to sin. Not only is it conducive to sin, it glorifies it, it normalizes it, and makes these things completely normal, things that for us we deem as harmful to our spiritual well-being. And when you're living in this type of environment, it's very easy to not only get caught up in that, but for ourselves too, to be brainwashed into thinking that, yeah, maybe these things aren't so bad. Maybe it's not that big of a deal to move in with somebody before you get married, or to have relations with them before you get married, whatever it is, because we're so brainwashed to believe that it's normal. It's not a big deal. You know, the right becomes wrong and wrong becomes right. Truth becomes falsehood and falsehood becomes truth. And that's really the time that we're living in today. So living in an environment surrounded with rampant sinning is another cause of this weakness. So it's almost like we have to play two roles as Muslims. Number one, we have to always be on the defense, because we live in this type of environment where we're constantly shielding off things that we see like a ninja, whether it's an image or it's a thought or it's a way of life, whatever it is. You have to constantly just be like, no, that's not in line with what I believe. That's wrong. It's sinful, whatever. So you have to be on the defense, and then you have to be on the offense. And that's something we'll talk about later. But this constant defense mode is something that, you always have to combat. For here in America, it's different. While I was in Dubai, I was always in defense mode because it's such a materialistic society and consumeristic. Not that it's not here, but over there, it's like on another level. And so that was like my defense, like, no, I gotta, refrain from kind of just giving into this type of thinking, or, what things that were normal there. In relation to this, the Prophet ﷺ said, can anyone walk through water without wetting his feet? And his companions replied, no. The Rasul ﷺ then said, such is the condition of this world. They are not safe from sins. So yes, the society we're living in today is one that's conducive to sin and to batil, this like falsehood. But that's not to say that that's any different from the rest of time. Yeah, there were little pockets where Islam's reign was so far and there was justice on earth and we had excellent rulers, but for the most part, you had Muslims living in this type of situation, environments surrounded with this widespread falsehood. So, and same goes for the time of the Prophet ﷺ, which is why he said, can anyone walk through water without getting his feet wet? And the water in this analogy is the environment, the society that we live in. Of course, we're going to soak up some of that. We're not safe from sins, but the key is to be on the defense, and then, like I said, the offense. So knowing that, yes, we're not safe from these sins, but what are we going to do about them? Are we going to acknowledge them, make istighfar for them, feel remorse for them, and get back onto the straight path? I thought there was another hadith, but there's not. So, this is the second one, is living in this environment. The third thing that adds to this weakness of iman is failing to seek knowledge on a constant basis. Many of us, we go to Sunday school when we're young, and that's where we get our preliminary Islamic teachings, right? Like we learn, for the most part, some seerah, we learn how to read the Quran, we memorize some surahs, and then you get busy with life. You go to school, you study, you get your degree, you get married, go get a job, you do all those things that you're supposed to do. And somewhere along the way, we forget that you're supposed to keep up with that knowledge and continue to seek that divine knowledge all the way through to the end of our lives. It doesn't stop when you stop going to Sunday school, or, it's not just for those who are deciding to pursue Islamic studies in college. It's incumbent upon every single Muslim. We all have to continue educating ourselves beyond just this preliminary education we get as children. If we're not informed Muslims, then what informs the things that you do on a daily basis, whether it's praying your 5 times a day or fasting the month of Ramadan, if you're not educating yourself as to why we do these things, educating yourself about, with the breadth of wisdom that we have in the Quran. And it's incumbent upon all of us, whether that's making sure that we are at least trying to learn the Arabic language, something that is a real responsibility on every Muslim. We all read these prayers every single day, and to read them, and imagine you live your whole life praying and saying these surahs, and you die not even really knowing what you were saying. It's an ongoing process, seeking knowledge, and failing to seek this knowledge while suffering from everything that we're being bombarded with in this outside society is contributing to this weakness of faith. Now, those are the three causes of this weakening of iman. Now, what are the symptoms? So the symptoms of a weak iman are kind of like what the comment that woman had left. So you're performing your prayers, maybe, and if you are, they're devoid of feeling. You don't feel any real feeling inside your heart. There's no humility there. There's no, it's just devoid of any real feeling. And the Rasul ﷺ said, Allah does not accept the dua of one whose heart is heedless of him. So for somebody to get to that point where their heart is so black, it's completely cut off, just cut and severed from any type of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you're that heedless of him, that's when may Allah protect us from ever getting to that point. The second symptom is falling into sin and committing haram deeds with ease. So it's one thing when you're doing something wrong and you're like, okay, I shouldn't be doing this, but maybe you're doing it, but that it's wrong. But when you do something with ease, without any hesitation or without reservation, that's when you know that, okay, you have a real issue with your iman. And when you persist with those sins to the extent that it becomes a habit and you have no remorse, no repentance, it's one thing when you know you have a weakness and you sin and you feel bad and you repent and you say istighfar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you're weak, so you do it again, but you still feel bad about it. You know that it's wrong, and so you repent against it. And this process could happen 1,000,000 times over, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive you every single time. And there's a long hadith about this where a companion is asking, will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me? Yes. And then he goes and does it again. Will Allah forgive me? Yes. He does it again. And then he says, when will Allah not forgive me? And the Rasul says he will stop forgiving you once you stop asking him for forgiveness. So it's one thing if this is the cycle, but it's a whole other thing if you're persisting in these sins and you have no remorse, you don't repent. And it's another level when you're committing these sins openly, when you have blatant disregard for any like haya or shyness in front of other people that you're committing these sins, when you're openly flaunting your sins. it implies disrespect towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's almost like stubborn provocation in a way that you're like, you know, you're doing all these things and you want the world to know that you're doing it, or you don't care if the world knows that you'll do it. The Rasul said, all of my ummah will be fine except for those who commit sin openly. An example of which is a man who does something at night, and when morning comes and Allah had concealed his sin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concealed him of what he did at night, this man goes and says, oh, so-and-so, I did such and such yesterday. His Lord had covered his sin all night, but he had uncovered what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had concealed. So openly flaunting your sins is a huge, it's not only is it a huge sign of disrespect towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at the same time, that's like a red flag of weakening of Iman. And the third symptom is a lack of concern for the welfare of your fellow Muslim. That's also a big symptom of a lack of faith, whether it's, you know, not giving in charity, not helping, not feeling in your heart like you care about your fellow Muslim brother or sister. You know, having this feeling that the entire ummah, you know, the Rasul said the entire ummah is like one body. If the believer feels pain in one part of his body, then the rest of the body feels the pain. Sorry if I didn't get that right. I don't have it here. But I'm sure you all have heard that hadith. But if we don't feel that, if we feel as though, you know, each one to himself and this like complete individualistic mentality where you have no concern for the welfare of your fellow Muslim, that's another real sign of a lack of Iman. All right, so those are kind of the causes as well as some of the symptoms. So let's get right into how do we protect ourselves? What do we do? How do we get back on track? And like I said, Ramadan is right around the corner, so I'm going to try and make these as relatable to Ramadan as I can. So let me start, number one, by talking about getting rid of things that take you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, I think this is the very best and the first place to start. I don't know if you guys watched this, but the very first live stream I did when I started live streaming on YouTube was about having a crisis of faith. And I talked about actually my experience last Ramadan, which was, you know, something was happening to me last Ramadan. I was still doing the motions, you know, praying all my sunnahs, standing up at night for Taraweeh, reading my juz every day. I try and finish the Quran during the month of Ramadan. I was doing all the motions, but I was feeling so empty inside. And it wasn't just empty, I was feeling a crazy disconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it was really scary for me. And one of the things that I mentioned, and I wrote a whole blog about it because I felt so strongly about it, was, subhanAllah, one day I was in Tahajjud, Taraweeh, I don't know, I was praying by myself, and I was in sujood, and something came over me. I was just talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about, and really having a conversation with him where I was kind of like talking out loud and expressing myself and trying to talk through what I was going through, knowing that he was listening. And as I was thinking about what the things were that were putting these black stains on my heart and causing there to be a real shield between myself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I quickly, you know, I got out of prayer, I went right to my phone and I got on Instagram and I started unfollowing a bunch of people. It was just an instinct. It wasn't something I was thinking about for weeks, like, oh, should I do this? Should I not? It was just like inspiration from Allah, where I was like, it just clicked for me that, you know, these images that I'm looking at are not helping my heart. And I got on there, I unfollowed every Kardashian I was following, every like Kardashian-like person I was following, whether they were like, I knew them or didn't know them in real life. You know, anybody that I felt like looking at these images is not good for my heart. And that was a personal thing for me. For you, maybe, you know, to be honest, I don't think those images are good for anybody, but maybe that's not your thing. Maybe it's like music you're listening to where the lyrics are just haram and it's starting to affect you in a way that you're not really understanding and trying to cut that music out. or TV shows that you watch that, you know, are just trash and just not good for your heart, whatever it is. So the first step in getting back on track, especially now that Ramadan is right around the corner, is getting rid of these distractions, getting rid of the things that take you away from Allah, things that are not good for your heart. Really sit down and think about yourself, your day. What takes up your time throughout the day? What are you doing in your day? Like if you need to get out a pen and paper and literally write down like every half hour of the day what you're doing, that would be immensely helpful, not just for time management, so you can kind of see like where you're wasting time, but to know what is occupying your time. And what of those things are things that are just pure distractions that you need to cut out. You know, like I'm not saying we should be like, you know, you never watch TV, you never listen to music. Obviously that's just not realistic. But whatever you are consuming, you have to make sure that that stuff does not include things that are just blatantly haram, things that will start to over time deteriorate your values or your morals. You know, whatever it is, and it's gonna be different for everybody. For me, it was the Instagram thing. Maybe for some of you, it's like people you follow on Snapchat that's making you bitter or jealous inside, or, you know, like hanging around the wrong people. Maybe it's a crew or like somebody that's just really bringing you down or influencing you in a wrong way. Maybe that person just like, you need to just slowly back away from that person so that they don't affect you negatively. It's going to be different for everybody, but the first step is to sit down, really truly reflect and try and get rid of these distractions that are taking you away from Allah. Now, the next thing is, it correlates, but it's just a bit different. Number two, and this should really be number one, to be honest, which is abstain from haram. Reflect again on your behavior and on our actions. What haram are we doing that we need to abstain from? Or is it things is it from the tongue? Is it things that we're saying, whether we are in the habit of gossiping, or backbiting, or cursing, or lying, whatever those things are. Maybe it's things that you're looking at with your eyes, whether it's images that are haram, maybe you're invading somebody's privacy with your eyes, not lowering your gaze. Maybe it's things that you listen to with your ears, like I was saying, like music that maybe glorifies haram, or actively listening to this gossip and backbiting. Maybe you're not the one doing it, but you passively participate, which is also, you know, a big sin. Maybe there are things you're doing with your hands, you know, like real sins, like stealing, drinking, cheating, you know, going to places you shouldn't be going, doing things with people that you shouldn't be doing, whatever, and any haram activity that you're physically doing. Or maybe the haram is that you need to abstain from is diseases within yourself, like your character. Like, are you a person who's super quick to anger? Do you have arrogance in your heart? Are you stingy? Are you cold towards people? Real sicknesses and diseases of the heart that are abhorrent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are those the things that you need to really focus on and abstain from? All of us have them. Every single one of us sin. All of us. We each do it differently. So really seriously reflect. If you're here watching this video, that means that you have a willingness to be better and to change, and that you want to get back on track. So you need to think about, what are those things for you that you need to abstain from? What are the sins that you get that are pulling you back and withholding you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure and His bounty? And be honest with yourself. You know, I was saying the last live stream, you can't truly understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until you know and understand yourself. And that's the only way that this connection can just open for you in ways that is going to change your life. So being honest with yourself and digging deep into your soul, into the depths of who you are, and, you know, unearthing those things that no one knows about you, those like deep, dark, disgusting things inside of you. We all have them, those diseases, those sins, whatever they are. Unearth them, confront them head on, understand why they're getting you down. Why do you do these things? Is it an insecurity you need to deal with? Is it some sort of like baggage that you haven't dealt with and so you're coping with these haram things? Whatever it is, you have to dig deep so that you can understand why you're doing it. Don't put a small band-aid on a large wound. Dig deeper. So that's the second thing, is abstaining from haram. And now the third thing that correlates with that, after you've kind of figured those things out and you know what you need to be doing to abstain from those things and learning from them, is making istighfar. Okay, so the Rasul in this hadith, he said, I testify that were you not to make mistakes, if you were a people who did not sin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have taken all of you and he would have eradicated you all, and he would have put in place of you a people that did sin, and who not only who sinned, but who asked for forgiveness so that he could forgive them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us knowing that we are insan. Insan means like human in so many words. But what's the root word of insan? Or one of the words that correlates with insan is nasa, to forget. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us intrinsically this way. We falter, we're weak, we fall into sin. Well, what do we do? What's the key to salvation? Asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness so that he can forgive us. Now the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know that he made istighfar 70 times a day. And this is somebody who was guaranteed Jannah. He saw Jannah with his own eyes and knew that it was promised to him. Yet every single day he took the time to make istighfar 70 times. How many times a day do we make istighfar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How many times a day do we do it? If the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who's promised Jannah, is making istighfar 70 times a day, we need to be doubling, tripling, quadrupling that. So istighfar is so key, and it's so important. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said, truly hearts rust just as iron rusts, right? We're talking about your heart getting rusty. And how do you polish that rusty heart? The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, polishing is saying La ilaha illallah and seeking forgiveness. So this La ilaha illallah, that it denotes dhikr, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, glorifying his name, saying istighfar, dhikr, remembering him, and seeking forgiveness. And Allah loves those who constantly turn to him in repentance, who ask for forgiveness. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never grows tired of listening to his slave praise him and ask for forgiveness. And he never ceases to grant us that forgiveness. And don't ever lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness and mercy. Don't ever think that you're too far gone, that you're too far out, that, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he'll never forgive me. I've done all these terrible things. Don't let your hope overpower your fear so that you become negligent, so that you lose hope in getting that forgiveness in return. This is a trick from shaitan. And like I said in the beginning, your future is not determined by your past. Every single moment is a new moment for you to seize. If you hold on to who you were and your past and let that define you, again, you're letting shaitan win. That's a hold that he has over you, making you feel as though you're undeserving, that you're not worthy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness. But every single person, we know the story of the prostitute who was forgiven of all her sins just by doing a generous act of feeding, not even feeding, giving water to a thirsty dog who was panting. And this is a prostitute. You know, I mean, we hear that hadith all the time, but really think about that. I'm sure every single one of you listening in, my light just went out again, you guys. This is so annoying. I'm really sorry about this, y'all. I need to hold on a second, you guys, don't kill me. I'm gonna try and move over. See if I can get some of the light from the city. Let me open this, you guys. I'm so sorry. Okay. I don't even remember what I was saying. But yes, every single one of us are worthy of Allah Ta'ala's forgiveness, and don't let anything or anyone trick you into thinking otherwise. Okay, where am I then? So disoriented. All right, so the first thing we talked about, right? Getting rid of the distractions that take you away from Allah Ta'ala, abstaining from haram, and then istighfar. Now, before I get into other things that I want to talk about, I just want to say real quickly, I think it's really important going into Ramadan to have an action plan, right? Don't let this be just another Ramadan that passes you by, where at each day you're just like watching the clock, waiting to eat, and you go through it, but you don't really get anything out of it. And you know, Ramadan, and this is something that my teacher always talks about, Ramadan is not, it's like, yes, it's a time that we use to recharge, where we, you know, recharge through spiritual connectedness to Allah Ta'ala so that it can kind of carry us throughout the year. But at the same time, we shouldn't come to Ramadan with our batteries on empty, right? Like completely zeroed out, and we're like, yes, I need Ramadan because I need to get that boost again. You know, I understand that that's the situation a lot of us are in, but that shouldn't be our goal. The goal should be that we're spiritually inclined throughout the entire year, and Ramadan is that gift that Allah gives you where it can increase those blessings, where you can multiply them 10 times over with every act that you're already in the habit of doing, and you can grow by introducing new and, you know, better habits that just increase and multiply the rest of your year. Does that make sense? So I think we're getting it wrong. Like, you know, and I hear this from so many of my friends, like, oh, I can't wait for Ramadan. I really need it. Like, I'm in such a bad place. And that's great. That's great. Ramadan will get you out of that slump and will bring you into a better place. But let our mindsets be that Ramadan be the starting point this year for you to just propel forward, to grow and continue growing so that next Ramadan you're at an even higher place that can take you even higher the next year. Does that make sense? It shouldn't be like this battery that we're like on empty right before Ramadan, we fill up, and then the next Ramadan we're back down here, because then we're not growing. We're not getting better. We're just like, it's that extreme high and low thing I was talking about earlier. So set a goal, like, you know, like realistic goals for yourself. What can you realistically get done? You know, I mentioned that I try to finish the Quran within the month. Maybe that's like daunting for you. Like Arabic is really difficult for you. Just finishing a juz would be fantastic. If that is your goal, then great. Make that your goal. Whatever is realistic for you. Allah Ta'ala, the Rasul said, Allah Ta'ala loves actions, those who do things consistently, actions that are consistent, even if they're small. So even if that means, you know what, I'm going to set out to memorize 2 surahs, small surahs this month. That's all I'm going to do this month. Whatever it is for you that you know that you can handle, so that you can actually check them off at the end of the month. So the things just like for myself that I, like my goals in the month, number 1 is to increase obviously in Quran, like I just said. I try and finish the Quran in that month. Sometimes I get really close, like I'm on the 27th month. You know, keep in mind as women, we really only have like 2/3 of the month to read. So sometimes, you know, the end of the month will be near, and like I can't pray, and I'm just like, I'm out of luck. But I do try, and that's one of my goals. The next thing is with prayer, and the goal that I set for myself, number 1 is making sure that not only am I praying every single prayer on time, preferably right when it comes in, but I'm also making sure that I'm mindful of all my sunnah prayers, and that I'm standing in Taraweeh every single night and trying to go to the masjid for Taraweeh every night. And if I can't make it to the masjid, then doing Taraweeh at home. And one thing I try and do is I will read, you know, I hold the Quran in my hand during my Taraweeh if I'm praying at home, and read a couple pages in each rak'ah to help me with that Quran reading. Another thing with prayer is increasing my tahajjud. I've been really bad with tahajjud lately. Astaghfirullah, it's been like eating at me that I haven't been waking up, because to be honest, and this is like a gift that I really got from my teacher who is a huge proponent of tahajjud, and it's so beautiful how she talks about it. And basically, like, that is the key. If you want to know how to connect with Allah, if you're sitting there like, you know, I have that hard heart, I am so far from Allah, I do fall into sin easily. You want to know what the answer is? Wake up in the last third of the night and put your head to the ground. It will change your life. Like, it will perform miracles. You will see just a huge change in the way you feel about God and how you think about him and your connection with him. Because when you're putting your head to the ground, it's sincere. You know, you're not doing it for anybody. You woke up in the last third of the night when you'd rather be sleeping. Like, one of the basest needs, sleep, right? Nobody else is around. It's just you and God. And when you can pour your life out onto that floor, knowing that Allah is listening, and just, you know, really dive deep into how much you want to connect with him and the things that are holding you back, it's a beautiful thing. So tahajjud is a really big cornerstone of Ramadan for me, and that's a goal that I set for myself. I try to wake up at least twice a week. And then, of course, in the last 10 days, increase that as much as I can, particularly the odd nights, of course. And so those are kind of like my goals. And like I said, for everybody, it's going to be different. But the key is make sure that you set your goals. And so for me, those are the things that I do every month. But now I need to set, okay, what's my next goal? Do I want to listen to like a whole lecture series and finish it? Do I want to memorize X amount of surahs? Do I want to catch up on, you know, brush up on these surahs that I'm kind of rusty on? Whatever. Like, there's an additional goal each month that I set out to do. And I don't put too much on my plate because, you know, again, there's Rasulullah said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who do things consistently, even if they're small. So, so that being said, one thing that I just really wanted to touch on was our eating habits during Ramadan. You know, I read, and I wrote about this before, but there's like this statistic I read that in Dubai, I'll read it for you exactly. In Dubai, the food wasted in Ramadan is 15 to 20% more than that outside of Ramadan, which is like so terrible. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm just going to read you this hadith that Rasulullah said. And you all know this hadith, but many of us only know the second half of the hadith and not the first half, which is the most important and I think pertinent part. He said, when filled with food, the belly becomes the worst container for the son of Adam. It's sufficient for a human being to have a few bites to keep himself fit, to make his back erect. If one must eat, then let him use 1/3 for food, 1/3 for drink, 1/3 for breathing. We all know that hadith, right? The last part, 1/3 food, 1/3 drink, 1/3 air. But we forget, or we don't even know the first part, which is all we need are a few bites to stay fit, to keep your back erect. But if you must eat, okay, fine, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. The standard is not the 1/3, the standard is the few bites. So in Ramadan, more than any time, we have to observe this. At the very least, the 1/3 rule, if not the few bites rule. And the reason is because, like he said, the belly becomes the worst container when filled with food. It makes you lazy. It makes you lethargic. Like, how many times have you been to an iftar and you overeat and you're like, I just want to sleep? You know, like, how likely are you going to then go to Taraweeh? It's going to be really hard on you because you're lethargic, you're lazy, you don't want, you know. So be mindful of what you're eating. We fast Ramadan to have empathy and compassion for those who have no food. It's not supposed to be a month of feasting and overindulgence and extravagance. And, you know, for those of you who have iftar dinners, take pride in having a few things for your guests to eat. You don't need 4 to 5 entrees and 4 to 5 appetizers and a huge dessert spread. Yes, make enough food, but don't go overboard. And you should be proud of that fact, that there's only enough food that you need. No, you don't go crazy, you know, with these spreads trying to keep up with the Joneses because that's what everybody's doing. That's not the spirit of Ramadan. Gosh, it's already 8:45, y'all. I've been talking so much and there are all these comments. I'm gonna just read some of them. What are the books that you would recommend to further one's deen and also other genres? I think it would depend on what your interests are. You know, I was really getting into Ghazali at one point. Marvels of the Heart is a really good book. But then I started taking classes and got more regimented about my spiritual and like divine knowledge seeking. So I would have my Sira book with my Sira class, my Tajweed book, you know, in that vein. So a really good book to read is In the Footsteps of the Prophet by Tariq Ramadan. It's a great Sira book. I think that everyone should go through the Sira of the Rasul like once a year. Like you finish a Sira book and then, you know, get another one, because it's so important to be mindful of the Sira, because the Rasul and his example is so important and informs everything that we do. Another really good Sira book is just called Muhammad by Martin Lings. That's a really good one. What do you do when you have doubts about Islam? There are a lot of things that make me further from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when I research about women's in Islam. Number one, I would go back and listen to my live stream about crisis of faith. I really talk about, you know, having doubts in your faith, and doing your own research about things that you don't know about can be really harmful if you don't know what you're doing. I would really suggest you talk to somebody who knows and understands legal jurisprudence, if that's what it is that you're like, I don't get it, or fiqh, or you know, just like Islam in general. Talk to somebody with knowledge rather than seeking it out on your own with little knowledge and then reading all these different things that are confusing you. So seek some real, actual, like educated opinions. Yeah, see how you're saying things such as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that it's best for women to pray in the innermost corner of the house. That's not the hadith. The hadith is that that the reward for a woman is so great who creates like a small kind of haven within her home in which to worship. And let's be real, like women have a lot to deal with, whether you're rearing children or, you know, like you're tending to the things in the home or whatever it is. Yes, when you can get out and go to the masjid, that's great. But there are going to be a lot of times when you can't, you know, like there are really real issues when you can't go out. You have kids to tend to, you have the house to tend to, you have to cook, you have to, you know, like, not that that's like an obligation on a Muslim woman, but there are things that, you know, as a woman, you need to take care of. And, you know, again, like it's really easy to misinterpret these things. So talk to somebody with some real knowledge to help you walk through this stuff so that you're not getting any doubts there. How can we balance social life, family and friends, and doing good deeds in and out of Ramadan? To be honest with you, you shouldn't have a social life in Ramadan. Like Ramadan is a short 30-day period where your number one goal is to get the most out of it that you can. Be selfish in Ramadan. Like if, you know, yes, you have to accept the invitation of other people. So if you're invited for an iftar and you can make it, go. You break fast, you eat, you stay for a little bit, you bounce. You don't need to stay there for 3-4 hours. Most of the time the conversation turns into like, you know, vain talk anyway. If it's not outright haram, it's not useful stuff anyway, most of the time. You might as well be, you know, like getting ajr, standing up in Taraweeh. So I truly feel like Ramadan is not, yeah, it's cool because like, especially when we're growing up, I loved Ramadan, right? Because it was a socializing thing. You go to the masjid, everyone's there every night. It's so much fun. But now that we're older, it's like, you need to get on track. Ramadan is a time where you are reaping the most benefits as possible. Every single second should not be wasted. It's like filled with blessings if you take advantage of them. So what I advise you to do is have like one huge iftar, invite everybody to like a third, you know, outside of your home, whether it's at the masjid, at like their banquet hall, or to like some other place, and have your iftar. Do that one day, you know, in the beginning of the month too, so you're not wasting one of the last 10 days cooking and cleaning. And that's it. That's it. You know, like, don't waste your time with all these iftar parties and these, trust me, it's such a waste. You have the rest of the year to do all that stuff. So save the socializing till after Ramadan. Focus on yourself. Be selfish in Ramadan. You want to be focusing on increasing your iman and your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Get the most out of this month. I'm asking if someone has anxiety and is working on getting a better social life. If that's the case, then I suggest, you know, having somebody close to you that maybe you feel comfortable with, and having them kind of like accompany you to different social events. That'll help if you have any anxiety, because going at it alone can you know, like, amplify that anxiety. Any suggestions on how to fast happily while living with non-Muslims? I need to encourage my family, and they always make pain faces at me when I fast. Yeah, that can be difficult. My mom does that, has the same habit of doing that type of stuff. And, you know, it's just like, it's tough because you can't get angry, you can't answer back, you can't lash out. You just have to be patient and kind of just deal with them and their reaction to you. But just have compassion and understand where they're coming from, because for maybe the majority of your life you didn't fast and this wasn't a part of your life, and now all of a sudden it is, and to them that can be threatening and difficult. And so kind of have compassion for them and understand where they're coming from and why they're making those pain faces, because, you know, at the end of the day, they love you, and they know that when they eat in front of you, for example, that they probably shouldn't, but it's like, ugh, now I can't eat in front of her. You know what I mean? So just understand where they're coming from, but just be patient with them and, you know, try and endure as much as possible. And inshallah, they'll come around. It takes time. It takes a lot of time for people to, you know, to get used to them, to get used to you know, these new things that you're doing in your life. Okay, I think those are all the questions. So the last thing that I'm going to say before we close here is the last point I always have when talking about connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After all those things that I mentioned, and I'm just gonna run through them really quickly again, which is to get rid of those distractions, abstain from the haram that you're doing, make istighfar, increase your prayer this month, increase your Quran reading this month, as well as seeking divine knowledge. The very last thing, is dua. Dua. The Rasul said that dua is the weapon of the believer with good reason. Dua is like the game changer. If you are sincere in turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with an open heart, even though it's hard, maybe like you feel this really, you know, like a shield, like I was saying before, between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you don't know where it's coming from, or you feel like your heart has hardened. But if you sincerely want to change, even though you have no idea where to start or how it's going to happen, or you can't even see yourself changing, you're in a situation where you're like, I'm stuck. If you sincerely turn to Allah and you really want to change, the doors will open for you. You just have to be sincere about it. Open your heart to Him, turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and pour your heart out to Him. You know, like, just put your head down on the ground and just let it all out. And it's an amazing thing when you can do that, and the more you do it, the first, the second, the third time might feel silly, like, who am I talking to? Is he listening to me? This is so dumb. I'm like, you know, putting my head to the ground and just like, you know, it might feel weird, like I might feel like awkward or like this out of body experience, but the more you do it, the more that your heart will start to open, and you'll start to forge a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because when you take one step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He takes 10 steps towards you, right? When you go to Him walking, He comes to you running. So He's never going to leave you. He's always there, waiting for you to turn to Him. So go to Him in your dua with a sincere heart, with an open heart, even if you're insisting on some sin that's so difficult for you to stop. But so long as that willingness to change is there, Allah will find a way out for you. And don't forget everybody, don't forget our Muslim brothers and sisters during this month. Make dua for your friends, for your family, for our community, for our ummah. Make that collective dua for all of the Muslim brothers and sisters around the world. And just don't forget how important dua is. Some of the sweetest moments in Ramadan for me ever that I can ever think of, and like memories of these moments I have, these sweet, sweet moments in Ramadan have been dua. Just like having an epiphany, just like pouring my heart out and feeling so connected to Allah. And those were the most precious moments for me. Sorry. Really quickly before we close, somebody was asking if I could do a tutorial on how to style hair under the hijab. Yes, Mary, I saw it. I don't know why you need to style hair. Do you mean like how to put your hair underneath your hijab? I just put it in a bun, and that's usually fine. Of course, you're allowed to brush your teeth during Ramadan. Try and as much as you can brush before, if fasting starts. So like if you wake up for suhoor, eat, brush your teeth, and then start fasting. But if not, then like yes, you can of course brush your teeth. Just be very careful not to swallow anything. Just be mindful of that. All right, so it is already 9 o'clock, and I don't want to keep you guys longer. Thank you so much for tuning in this week, and inshallah, we will see you guys in the next couple of weeks. For the next live stream, it will already have been a week and a half into Ramadan, so inshallah, you all have a great Ramadan. I wish you all a really beautiful opening of Ramadan. Make the most of this month. Go in full speed. Make those goals for yourself and stick to them. And inshallah, we all have a very blessed and fruitful Ramadan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. Inshallah. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.